Hello, everybody. I'm here today, finally. Last week I was unable to record a video just due to time constraints, so sorry for that. But today I want to talk about contemporary social issues, strengths in Native American tribal communities. And I really want to look at three aspects of this. And this is just the beginning of our last stretch of class discussions. We have a couple more to go. I think two or three more. So I really want to look at the good, the bad, and the future. So I don't want to focus necessarily on bad because social issues and strengths are not necessarily all bad. But no matter what it is, if it's good or if it's bad, it's still the future. So we have to kind of talk it, shape it, see where it's going to go. Because there are many issues that are affecting Native communities today that have an effect and had an effect on the future, whether it was a long time ago because anybody's future is ahead of them. So 100 years ago, people's future was 100 years behind us. So it's still the future. So we're looking forward. We're looking into that process. And what I really would like to do today is kind of focus a little bit on a couple topics, but we'll address a bunch of topics. So what are the topics? Well, these are the topics that I've identified that I will be looking at. Some of these we kind of skimmed as we went through some of the other lessons and readings. So here's the topics, and there is no in no particular order. So I'm going to talk about them, and these are the ones that our communities face. These are not necessarily ones that just Indian communities face, but we're going to talk about the Native communities and what they face. So we're talking sickness and disease. We're talking about professional and local school mascots. Touched on that earlier. Native gangs on reservations. This is something that we really don't look at or realize or understand or even wonder what it's all about. But we'll look at that a little bit deeper. Native gangs and posing as a Native American for gain. So there's actually a law in the state of Maine that says if you're not a member of a federally recognized tribe and you go out and market yourself as an Native American descendant or expert or whatever, so you represent yourself as a Native American for gain, whether it's for attention, whether it's for media attention or self-attention, or whether it's for money or both, whatever it may be. It's a law against that. There's actually a national law against it, and there's a Maine state law against it. We'll talk about that a little bit deeper as well. Also, there's a Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act called NAGPRA. And the Graves Protection and Repatriation Act really is something that's finally happening, that has been happening in Canada for a while, but now it's come over to the United States probably about 15, 20 years ago here. And it protects Native American graves from being exploited, so you can't just go dig them up and take the artifacts out and disseminate them, sell them, or show them in a public way. And repatriation means to rebury the bones that were dug up and put in boxes and studied. So it's illegal, and it has been illegal, and just general graveyards, you just don't go do that. But in Native American graveyards, for some reason, people did it and financially benefited from it or disrupted the graves, which is a desecration, really, if you think about it. Anybody whose grave is dug up, it's a desecration. So this gives us protection against that. Then we're going to talk about residential schools. We kind of touched on that. We're going to do a closer look on that as well. And we'll look at it on a national level as far as Canada and the United States. We'll also look at it and how it affected Maine Indian tribes. And again, Maine Indian tribes were not relocated. We're not relocated tribes. So it had an effect on us, but not as much as it did on the western, southwestern states, or even in Canada. Elder abuse, and that's just what it sounds like, whether it's financially exploiting an elder or physically abusing or neglecting an elder. that's something we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about, there's an article we're not going to really get into today, but it's called The Secret War on Dissent. And it's about the FBI and how the FBI suppresses, dissent among Native people and Native tribes. And there's a specific case we're going to be looking at. And I probably will be putting that up as an attachment in the folder whatever week we end up doing this, because as we're going down through these, we're not doing these all today. This is going to be what we're going to be looking at over the next few weeks into the last part of the semester. Sterilization of women, which was very common if a woman was having a baby. It was a federal mandate that if a woman was having a baby, a Native woman on a reservation or outside of a reservation in a hospital, that she was to be sterilized as after the baby was born. And that would essentially, that's a genocidal tactic, but it was very well documented, and it was part of medical practice, so that the women couldn't have babies anymore, and that would stop the bloodline of the Native people in that particular area that this happened. And it happened everywhere, but in other parts hit more. But I guess within each individual woman, it's 100% relevant. And there's a lot of women that are still alive today that can't have babies because of this tactic that took place back in the days. And we're also going to be talking about the urban Indian. So this is a little bit different than the rural Indian. So the rural Indian would be the one that lives on the reservations. Urban Indians are non-reservation based, so they live in cities, towns. They choose to live in those places, and we'll talk a little bit about them and their struggles and what they have to go through. All right. So here we go. I want to start out with this: in sickness and in health. And health is spelt wrong, but bear with me. Just notice that. Okay, so in sickness and in heath, but it's supposed to be health. So 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years before Christ, so it would be 3,014 years ago, we would say, here, eat this root. That's how we would basically, heal something. 1000 AD, that root is heathen. Here, say this prayer. So we're looking at physical healing here. 1850 AD, that prayer is superstition. Here, drink this potion. 1940 AD, that potion is snake oil. Here, swallow this pill. 1985, that pill is ineffective. Here, take this antibiotic. Around 2010, we say that antibiotic is artificial. Here, eat this root. And this particular slide comes from a doctor at Columbia University who teaches history of medicine. And I came across this slide, and I thought it's really appropriate in that it really looks at how we look at things. We have these health food stores now, and we talk now a lot about alternative healing, and in fact in some arenas it's actually paid for by insurances if you choose to go with alternative healing. So in that respect, we start out with a plant thousands of years ago. We go through all these different sort of levels of artificial health care, and we go back to eating or taking medicines that have come from the land to heal ourselves. So this is a real sort of poignant statement about the history of medicine and how Native people have always had this as well. And this is obviously applicable to a lot of different cultures. In fact, it was recently written, so I want to share this because it's poignant. Now we're going to spend a couple slides, maybe 2 or 3 slides here on the diseases. One of the diseases we forget about is a disease called dysphoria. Well, it's not really a disease. It's literally meaning the scattering of life. Dysphoria is an infectious disease which is able to disperse worldwide through the movements of international travelers. The specific example I want to focus on is Pemaquid, Maine, has had an outbreak in 1617 and again in 1620. And these were caused by bacteria that grows in the ballast of a ship, which was inadvertently transferred by cleaning of the ballast. So in other words, what we're doing here is I want to kind of uh, differentiate between the Great Dying, where a lot of people got sick, which happened later on. It's called smallpox, and smallpox was a disease that was just absolutely cognitively spread throughout the land. People knew they were doing it. It was well documented. Even though some people will dispute that documentation, it's well documented, and it's in people's handwritings. So we'll look at that. But let's go back to this dysphoria for a second, and that is that this is something that killed a lot of people, but not just native people. Basically, people that were living in this land. And if you're not familiar with the Pemaquid area, South Bristol, Waldoboro, Damariscotta, all those areas, that's the area I'm talking about in Maine, which is south of Rockland. So these particular areas had these outbreaks where they had a lot of people that were dying from this, and it was something that actually came about because when these sailing ships bringing trade items came across the ocean, they would come across and they would need to be cleaned, because everything that's in the ship, whether it's water, whether it's spilt drink, whatever it may be, ends up in the ballast of the ship. And obviously the ballast is the bottom of the ship that keeps the weight evenly dispersed, so the ship sails right in the water. And if the waves start rocking the ship to the left or right, the ballast kind of brings it back to the middle. And the ballast on these ships was basically rocks, and these rocks were covered with boards, and that was the ballast. And every once in a while they'd have to be cleaned. So what they would do is, in order to clean them, to keep diseases from breeding in the ship, especially when you're out to sea for a while with no chance of being able to do this. You can't clean the ballast obviously when you're sailing, because you're going to tip. So they would bring the ships onto the shore sideways. They would kind of sail them sideways, like say to a beach, and then the tide would go out and the ship would be completely laying on the land because it's low tide. You have 4 hours to clean those ballasts. And so what they used to do is these shipping companies would hire people that were very poor, that would do anything for money, and they would hand out these rocks one by one, make a line, and they'd take all the rocks out of the boat. They'd clean them. They'd clean the inside of the hull. Now they're only doing one side, and the next day they would rotate the ship, face it the other way, let the tide go out, and then they would do the other side of the ship. But what this would do is this would clean the bottom of the ship, basically get all the bacteria, all the nastiness, the grossness that kind of accumulates in dark places on rocks that are damp, which, if you can imagine, it would be a very, very disgusting sort of thing to do, because like I said, any fluids, any rot, any decay from anything above on the ship would end up in there. It would actually flow down in. So what this would do is this was nastiness. This was something that people would get these bacteria, in their eyes and in their mouths, and weaker immune systems, poor people would die. They'd die from it, and that was too bad. But it really affected, because what would happen is it could go from one person to another person through body contact, fluids, and stuff like that. So dysphoria was the first real big, wide sweeping sort of illness that came through this area. And people really didn't know why, obviously. They didn't have the science. I mean, they probably figured it out, but they didn't have the science to say, well, this is what we did, this is how it happened, and this is what we got to do next time. Because desperate people will do anything to earn money for, or food for their families. So this was a huge outbreak, but it was not smallpox. But smallpox did exist during this time in this area, but it had little effect in causing a number of deaths in the area, in New England area. So we'll talk about the devastation of smallpox. And here, this slide is going to show us basically the culture. So we're looking at, on the left hand side, we're looking at the actual tribes. And again, I'm looking at New England, obviously, Aboriginal cultures in New England. And then we have the pre-epidemic population, the post-epidemic population, and the mortality. So I put this slide in here because it actually tells us, and it's based on estimates. It's not based on any facts. It's not based on any solid figures. You can see everything's rounded up. Nothing is rounded down as far as, I mean, it's all rounded up to the 100th. So the Maliseet, say Maliseet Passamaquoddy area, that whoever was documenting this thought there was about 7,600 people living there. Eastern and Western Abenaki, 11,900 and 10,000 respectively. The Massachusetts tribe, 36,700, and so forth. And smallpox was introduced, and we have a remainder, what the population was after. And we look at the Maliseet and the Passamaquoddy with 2,500 from 7,600. That's a mortality rate of 67% of that population was killed by smallpox. Significant number. 75% of Eastern Abenaki, 98% of the Western Abenaki estimated to be killed by smallpox. 98% absolutely wiped out that community. These mortality rates are the ones that are important. 86%, 77, 95, 95, 91, 55. The Mohawk were the least hit. They were more inland, but 55% of your population, that's over half of the people around you. So it's still significant. And the Munsee, 81 to 91%. Again, these are all estimates. But the mortality rate here is what's significant. And because it's significant, it really shows the devastation and leads us to look at an extermination, one of the genocidal efforts that was made over here that was a very cognizant Holocaust attempt to rid New England of Native people. And it really, really knocked down a lot of people, women, children. Oh, this disease has no filter. It's going to take whoever, whatever it wants. And smallpox is a hideous, disgusting disease. I didn't put any pictures up on this particular slide of what smallpox looks like on the skid, but if you know look it up, it's prepare yourself for almost looking at something that's non-human. It really has that much of an effect on your physical appearance. So let's talk a little bit about Lord Jeffrey Amherst. Now, if you're familiar with Amherst, Massachusetts, this is who it's named after. Actually, he named it himself. He actually changed the name because he was able to do that. And here is some of the stuff that took place within the smallpox blankets, blankets that were delivered to tribal people, and handkerchiefs by Lord Jeffrey Amherst's command. So despite his fame, Jeffrey Amherst's name became tarnished by stories of smallpox-infested blankets used as germ warfare against American Indians. These stories are reported, for example, in Carlton Walden's Atlas of North American Indian. Waldman writes in reference to siege of Fort Pitt by Chief Pontiac's forces during the summer of 1763. Says this: Captain Simon had bought time by sending smallpox-infested blankets and handkerchiefs to the Indians surrounding the fort, an early example of biological warfare, which started an epidemic among them. Amherst himself had encouraged this tactic in a letter to User. So this come out of a book. I'm taking these quotes out. Some people have doubted these stories. Other people believing the stories nevertheless assert that the infected blankets were not intentionally distributed to the Indians, or that Lord Jeff himself is not to blame for the germ warfare tactic. However, there is so much documentation in his own hand that is available that actually came from England, because Lord Geoffrey Amherst was a British general, and so most of these documents were kept in Britain and not over here on the American side. And so we're looking at the mid 1700s on this, and he was very proud of it. He wrote a lot of it and documented a lot of it, and the letters went back and forth to different generals, different captains, different military leaders, in a way that basically had every single description of what was happening. How originally there's documentation about how Geoffrey Amherst and one of his other guys, Bouquet, who was also a general, but I think on the other side of the ocean, they wanted to rid this land, New England, of native people by use of dogs. So have dogs just go in and kill, wild trained dogs that would just rip apart people and kill people without, any reason really, even their own people. So it was a tactic that was deemed to be not really that effective because of the way in which the landscape was set up, the natural landscape. So it didn't work very well. So I'm not going to dwell on it too long here, but I just want to show you. So this is a plate out of a Lord Geoffrey Amherst collection, and he had these plates made, and this is just one example where you have a British military person on top of a horse swinging some kind of device, and you can see these native people running for their life. And he was really proud of this. He was really proud, so proud of what he had done, that he made these plates to show as he was eating, or he'd have guests come to his house to eat, that as they were eating and you're looking down, you're actually seeing his legacy. And I think these plates are held at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. And these are the least offensive of the plates, but it's the only one I could find. And again, these were made in sets, and you can see they're hand painted, hand drawn. But they come out of his personal collection, and this is what he used. I mean, he liked to say, I got my fortune and my city, town named after me because this is what I did. That's him on the horse, by the way, with his sword. Okay, just a student in the class sent me this picture. I thought this was pretty poignant. This was a picture from this year, opening day at the Cleveland Indians home game. And there were some Native American protesters there. Obviously you can see a guy on the left hand side, I'm sorry. That's a native guy. And then there's a guy who's dressed like an authentic Indian, because that's how everybody dresses on the right. Not really. But this guy in this headdress with his painted face is speaking to this native guy on the left. And the thing is that interesting is that there was also some dialogue with it, but I didn't put the dialogue in. But essentially what the man on the left was hearing from the man on the right was, the man on the right said, "This is honoring you. I am honoring you. This is what it is. I'm honoring you." And he tried to shake the Native American guy's hand, and the Indian guy wouldn't put his hand out. He just, this whole idea of, this is honoring you. That was the thing that this guy on the right kept saying over and over and over. I'm honoring you. You need to understand that. You need to accept that. And it's this paternalistic sort of attitude. And this native guy kind of looking at this, funkily dressed guy on the right, kind of gives him the look like, dude, seriously. This is, really, you painted your face red. Painted his face red. And look at the people in the background, all taking pictures of this. You think they know something's going on? They're probably Cleveland Indians fans. My guess would be they are Cleveland Indians fans. But look at them. They look like fans, not fanatics. That's how you go to a game. You enjoy a game like that. But this guy saying, this is honoring you, wasn't asking, he was telling. So let's move to native gangs, loss of identity. Now, I want to tell you a little bit of story here. You can read these. We'll go down through them as we go here. But I want to tell you a story about a little bit of work I've done on reservations in the United States and in Canada with native gangs. Because when I was in undergrad school, I was trained in sort of working with gang members and trying to help gang members who identified themselves as wanting to give up being in a gang. So if we had 2, 3, or 4 people that wanted to request us, and there was 2 guys from the Northeast, one Clint Shenandoah Onondaga from near about maybe 15 miles south of Syracuse at the Onondaga Nation, Iroquois, and myself from the Wabanaki Confederation on Indian Island, where I grew up. We were chosen and trained in how to talk with these people because they were our age at the time. They're probably still our age if they're still alive. We went down to different places. We found ourselves in Miami. We found ourselves in Phoenix, Arizona, Fresno, California, Oneida, Ontario, Billings, Montana. Just a few, there was about a dozen places that we went to and did this, and we would do a 1-week sort of workshop with these people who decided they wanted to give up being in gangs. But it was really hard because giving up being in gangs basically means you're a target. But most of these young men and women were not even caring. Like, if I'm a target, I'm a target. I'm getting out of it because it's not doing me any good. It's survival day by day. It's just not the way you should live. So we went down, and I'll just tell you this one story about, we went to Phoenix, and we were in Phoenix, and there's a lot of Mexican sort of gangs, people there, and there were Native American gangs, black gangs, white gangs, corner gangs, city block gangs. It was nuts. It was just crazy. And we had about 6 people that wanted to get out of these gangs and wanted to get out of Phoenix, but it was like this 1-week thing is like an intervention. And we also had psychologists with us, and there was probably a team of about 6 of us, but Clint and myself were the 2 that were their age, and we would help talk to them about what it is that, why did you get involved in the gang to begin with? Because we got to undo this. And it would always be like, well, I needed an identity. I need an identity. It makes me feel like I'm with somebody. It gives me a brotherhood, sisterhood. They protect me. But the thing about that is that these Native people didn't realize they have an identity. They have clan systems. They have family colors. They have clan colors. They have all kinds of ceremonies. They have brotherhood and sisterhood among each other in their traditional sense and in their contemporary sense. They don't need to be involved in gangs. So this one kid that was probably about 14 years old, a boy, and a little guy, and he was there, and he was telling that us that he was going to move out of Phoenix and go to I think it was somewhere in New Mexico anyway with an aunt, and because his mother and father were in jail and they were going to be in jail for 10 or 15 years. So we said, well, your mother and father are in jail probably for 10 or 15 years. He goes, yeah, so I'm going to be in my 20s when they get out, so I have to go to high school somewhere. And he said, I don't even know how to read, I don't know how to do any of this stuff. He said, I got to go to high school. He'd never been to school in his life. And so his story was this: when his mother and father had him and he could finally learn to walk, so he was around, obviously when babies walk, and then he got to be around 4 years old, he said. And when that's how we develop our first memories. He said from the time he was about 4 years old to the time he was about 10 or 11, his only job in his life was he was awake all night, sleeping all day, just as his parents were, because what they would do is they would go break into houses at night when people were sleeping, people that were living in the houses. They were in the house. They would break in, they would put him through the window. It would be his responsibility to go find the front door or back door and unlock it and let the parents in. And then he was unlocking the door, and he would go to the car where it was hidden, and he'd go in the back seat and fall asleep. And his parents would come out later on with stuff, put it in the trunk, and then off to the next adventure. He said they'd do this 2-3 times a night for his entire life. They would go to pawn shops and sell the stuff. They would, have cash or whatever, but it was all to support their drug habit and to pay some dues within their gangs. They all had dues to pay as well. Whether it was through money or whether it was through objects or drugs, whatever it may be, they had to do it. And so he had never been to school. There was no record of him even being, being registered for his school. So he said he'd watch TV all the time, and he would just sit in the back of the car and listen to music. So this was his life, and he wanted out. So when we talk about native gangs, there's research in this area that determined the factors of youth identity and tribal acculturation, and I'm going to look at the Navajo Nation in this one. And I think because this is the example I could really define. It's a study that was done, and that's the reason why I use this. I don't want to be speculative in what I'm talking about, but socioeconomic issues of poverty, alcoholism, and family dysfunction help lead people to these gangs. If you have no money and you are completely relying on your tribe or the government to bring in food or some sort of food assistance, you really become depressed. And depression can lead to a lot of things. It can lead to alcoholism. Obviously alcoholism is family dysfunction. Other things too are different kinds of abuses that happen within families and extended families as well. And because of this, you get the loss of traditional culture by persisting kinship ties among cousins. Now, persisting kinship ties among cousins in most native tribes, if you grew up on a reservation, your cousins are like your brothers and sisters. And in fact, you even consider people that are not blood related to you cousins. So you start losing your traditional culture. Are we going to hold on to our traditional culture forever? Are Native people going to? Yes. But are we going to hold on to that in daily life? No. Because our lives change. I don't have any intention of going to live in a wigwam and be out hunting and fishing all the time to feed me or my family. So we are going to lose some cultural aspects. Everybody changes, language changes, things move on. But forgetting who you are is nothing that's going to happen among Native people. That's never going to happen. We're never going to forget who we are. We're always going to have that traditional cultural knowledge. We might not be able to practice that every day. We might not want to. We might not know how to. But this, again, leads to loss of identity. Also, alienated youth who strongly related to certain strains of youth culture, especially gangsta identity, because um, this whole idea of, being a gangster, being feared. People look at you and they're like, "Whoa, I don't want to go near this tough guy. My life could be in danger. I better give them what they want if they ask me for something." Um, it just that whole idea becomes self-important, and it creates this real strange culture of some sort of hierarchy. Now, within that gangster identity, there is levels of gangsterness. So you got your lower ones, your middle ones, and your higher ones. And the guys at the higher level, we picture in our minds, based on media, based on what we hear if you haven't been involved in a gang, is that these are the guys that sit around, play cards, smoke cigars, and talk. And then everything from the lower levels of the gangster society are brought to them. So they're taken care of. But again, in the end, they're susceptible if they're not taking care of their people. These leaders are susceptible to harm, physical harm, which would remove them from their position. Also, high rates of geographic mobility of Navajo families between the reservations and metropolitan areas. And so you got, basically, they're moving around back and forth, back and forth. So they bring in different aspects of the metropolitan sort of gang attitudes back into the reservations. So they're moving constantly, and shifting reservation housing configurations that run counter to traditional settlement patterns. And this is basically stagnating people. And that when you stagnate somebody, you build a street out in the middle of the desert and you put people in those houses, and these people don't have cars because they don't have money, and the closest town's 20 miles away. There's no opportunity, zero opportunity for any economic, gain within this community. And those who do economically gain won't live in these communities. So if somebody does break out of it, somebody else will move into that house, and it's a continued sort of pattern of dysfunction. I'm gonna play this little video here. Just want you to watch it. I think it's let's see. I'm not sure how long it is, but I'll let you watch this and just listen to this. It's a little interview from some people who are involved in gangs, and it's a part of a documentary.
Traditional drum circles like this strike a powerful heartbeat throughout Indian country. But on some reservations, native youth are adopting a different rhythm.
Coming up a young G, another native kid, not giving a talking about the crazy shit I did. I ain't gonna lie, I come from a broken home. I'm a straight rider, leave you with a broken doom. Taking killer hits to the blood.
This is the Pine Ridge Sioux Reservation, South Dakota, one of the poorest places in the country, and it's increasingly plagued by gangs who imitate urban groups like the Crips and Bloods.
I'm 33rd, Northside Trey, Gangsta Crip, 33rd,
24-year-old Richard Wilson has already carried 5 of his fellow gang members to the grave because of drugs, suicide, and gang violence.
Yeah, this is where our Lakota people came from, just right around here. I've been up on a reservation all my life, A lot of people say it's like trash, but to me, it's just like, living in a ghetto, I mean, it's just like living in the city, People fighting each other, shooting each other, Someone's getting beat up every other night. This is my brother. I just turned 24, man, so this is me and my brother.
He and his 18-year-old half-brother, Richard Lame, are 2 of an estimated 5,000 youths involved with gangs on the Pine Ridge Reservation. That's 1 of every 10 people.
We had the Wild Boys, TBZ, we had Trays, we had Nomads, A-Town, Eastern Side, Indian Mafia, Aimster Gangsters, I could go on.
This is John Musso. He served as a local police officer for 14 years before becoming chair of the Tribal Judiciary Committee. He says that the number of gangs proliferated in the 1990s when money for tribal law enforcement dropped. But recently, violence is increasing.
In recent years, there's been some homicides, which is kind of just don't happen in small communities. So assaults against police officers, against people that's not gang related, it continued to rise, and a lot of intimidation. So it started affecting our the whole public.
Many native gangs are homegrown, with few, if any, ties to the large urban gangs they take their names and style from.
So we got our gang members, they burn their arms, so like branding, so they burn them. The difference between our gangs and big city gangs are, in the cities, they're territorial. You know, they claim a neighborhood, and when they sell drugs, it's for profit for the gangs, or one or two people profit, and they show a large sum of money. It's not like that here because we're an impoverished people, impoverished land, so it's more, they're fighting over scraps. They're not fighting over money.
I got at least 30 homeboys rolling with me.
That's Richard Lame. Unlike most, he stayed in school, but he's also a member of the Black Wall Street Boys.
I don't know, I do it for the joy of it, for the fun, I don't know, for the rush, for the thrill, I guess, whatever it is.
You get money, that's what, through selling things, or through
selling
things? Or?
Stealing, robbing, whatever we gotta do to get money.
With theft and violent crime on the rise, Pine Ridge officials have pled for more funds to bolster law enforcement. And as on other reservations facing gang problems, tribal members here, like Michael Littleboy, are fighting gangs on the cultural front, teaching Lakota language and values.
It's like a prayer song, and it's asking for like forgiveness and strength. The gang, right out the door, it's always there, you know, and no matter what, we fight with the spirituality, the singing and dancing and everything. We use that to prevent young children from gang violence and different things that go on the reservation.
We got a lot of absent parentism. They may be absent because through drug abuse, through alcohol abuse. They need to belong somewhere, and just like any other place, that gang gives them that false sense of belonging.
Today, Rich Wilson says he's not as active in gangs as he used to be.
Ever since birth, I've been waiting for this. You can bet I'ma be thugging to my last breath.
And despite his negative lyrics, Richard Lame privately says he wants to leave Pine Ridge and find a profession.
Music or computer work, mechanics or something, anything I'm good at, whatever is my future ahead anyway. Hopefully it's a good, bright one.
Aren't you worried that you might get a criminal record that'll prevent that?
Maybe if I keep doing the stuff I'm doing, yeah. Mess up, slip behind bars, I don't know. Yeah, gotta get my mind right, my thoughts straight. Gotta get on top, somehow.
So this is an example of, from their own mouths. So these are the states that have the most active gang areas, I guess, that have been identified by the FBI, with the help of tribal law enforcement, and also the federal Indian marshals. And that is, in no particular order, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, North and South Dakota. And when you look at this is how it comes up, is that, again, these are the two biggest, the Indian Posse and the Native Syndicate, and they actually originate from Canada, but they span into the United States as well. So the Indian Posse, they estimate around 12,000 members based in Winnipeg, Canada, and the Native Syndicate, they estimate around 800 members based in northern Manitoba and Canada. And these are all drug-related sort of gangs that actually do profit from the sale of drugs, at least at the highest level. The lower level of the worker bees that just go out and do this stuff, they're probably taken care of. They're not making any profit, but they're being taken care of. So these are the two biggest identified gangs, and it's kind of weird that one comes out of Winnipeg and the other one comes out of Manitoba, Canada, but this is what it is, and this is the hierarchy of that. And last, I think this is our last topic for this class, is the idea of making false claims. So there is a law in the state of Maine, and the law is called LD 1595, and it was passed by the House of Representatives in January of 2012. And this was put out because of a topic we'll talk about on the next slide. But let's talk about this one. So it's an act to impose a penalty for making false claims regarding affiliation with a federally recognized tribe. Be it enacted by the people of the state of Maine as follows. Section 1, blah, blah, is enacted to read. Fraudulent claim of affiliation with a federally recognized tribe. A person is guilty of fraudulent claim of affiliation with a federally recognized tribe if a person, A, knowingly claims falsely to be affiliated with a federally recognized tribe, has the intent to obtain by making claim under paragraph A something of value to which a person is not entitled, and obtains by making a claim under paragraph A something of value to which a person is not entitled. Fraudulent claim of affiliation with a federally recognized tribe is a Class C crime. This bill creates the crime of fraudulent claim of affiliation with a federally recognized tribe for when a person knowingly claims falsely to be affiliated with a federally recognized tribe with the intent to obtain and does obtain something of value to which the person is not entitled. And this is something that just goes back to selling. And if you're selling something, then you have to sell it under all U.S. government laws and parameters. To look at this is basically we have people who are not tribal people but like to dress up like that, like to dress up like how they think tribal people look, and go to schools, go to libraries, and market themselves as descendants. And now a descendant is not a tribal member. So, but they say they're descendants. They'll say like I'm Abenaki descendant, I'm Cherokee descendant, or whatever it may be. And those particular sort of excuses when they go there, they make money. They absolutely make money, and they're charging a fee, $300-400 to go into a school for the day to do a show and tell. And so they are making money off fraudulently claiming who they are. They're selling themselves as something they're not. Also, you have objects like drums that are Native American drums, pipes, or whatever they may be, any kind of Native American crafts. There's a federal law which bars people from selling Native American crafts if they are not Native American, because they're misrepresented in themselves in the market. Because the person who's buying something from the other side thinks they're buying something that they're really not. So there's a federal law for that, and it was not not really managed in Maine, because Maine doesn't conclude itself with federal law on Indian law. So anything that has to do with Indian law federally, if the state of Maine doesn't recognize it, then it doesn't apply. So Maine's the only state that's like that. So we have to go look for separate laws. So this law is that we're looking at here is basically the federal law brought to Maine. And why do we do this? Okay, and here are 4 people out of many that misrepresent themselves. So there's this guy up in this left-hand corner who, this is actually a mug shot, claims that he was arrested because he was Native and he was smoking pot or something, because, you know, obviously Native people smoke pot a lot, you know, apparently. And you know, he was doing something ridiculous, and not even Native, not even a Native American, but claiming he was, using that as an excuse. And the guy on your right hand side at the top, he is not a Native person, but he's actually marketed himself in several arenas and been in a few documentaries, just basically dressing up like this, shaving his head and dressing up, and silver all over him, and wampum shells and blankets, and guns and pipes and different things wampum, but absolutely not native, but definitely and still is marketing himself in Maine as a native person. So the only way he can be stopped is if somebody reports him that he made money by doing something and misrepresenting himself. So he's not native, but he's playing Indian. He's dressing up like that. The left hand side lower picture with the minister or priest, I can't quite tell, I think he's a priest, but there are two people standing there next to him. Again, dyed hair, like so black that I don't even know how if such a black exists like that, but obviously it does because it's in her hair, and deer skin and all these things hanging from her belt, and this guy too. These two actually market themselves. It's their primary way of living. They market themselves. They make objects. They put them on eBay. They sell them. They go to schools. They even have a village in Maine somewhere that they refer to it as a reenactment village. So they built this village, and they're hoping to make it into a museum, like a living history, sort of like a Plymouth Plantation. These two have been hugely targeted by the tribes because they're actually getting donations from the state, from federal agencies, under false circumstances, saying that they're native people, that they're doing this because they love their heritage. They really want this to be something that a lot of kids can learn from. Unfortunately, the kids will be learning from false pretenses. And again, these two are dressing up and they're playing Indian. Then the guy on the right hand side on the bottom, who looks like he got electrocuted or is choking on some maybe gigantic fireball, or I don't know, or he's singing. Sorry. He's he's part of a drum group that goes around and markets themselves as some tribe that no one's ever heard of from Maine. But again, not native, dressing up. Of course, if you're native, you have to have a bear claw necklace. You have to. I mean, who doesn't? And apparently you have to wear a head brooch and shave your head bald. I don't understand that shaving your head bald thing. I really don't. It's not something we did. Our hair was our strength, so it's odd. But these are Maine citizens right here that you're looking at on this slide, who actually make money playing Indian. Now, because of this law that was put in place a couple of years ago, the people on the lower left-hand side have actually had to take their website down and stop asking for donations, because, again, they were doing it under false pretenses. And they all changed their names. They all changed their names to, like, pissing in the wind, or running water, or one who blows hot air, or I don't know, I'm just making that up, but they always think you got to have names like that. You can't have like a normal name. But these are all fakers. So the biggest point of this slide is evaluate your resources, and people are resources as well. And they all go around to schools. They all go around to libraries. They try to get themselves involved in documentaries because they really want to earn money this way. They want to make money. And I don't know what they do for a living, but I can tell you, I know two of them personally, and what they do for a living is nothing. They just try to make money on dressing up, playing Indian. So here's our conclusion. Last slide. Imposed illnesses have had a deviating impact. It's supposed to be devastating. I did really, really poorly with my typing this time. Had a devastating impact on tribes. Also, Native gangs are destructive forces within Native American communities. They're not beneficial to Native communities at all. They don't bring good. They don't bring economic development. They don't bring anything that makes their children proud. They're destructive. So posers be posing, be aware. And as I worked with gang members. Gang members are basically posers, posing as something else, posing as the poser. Who's posing as a poser? It just keeps going and going and going. And I'm not trying to sound cool and hip, although I think I really do right now. But this is this is the whole idea. So evaluate your resources is the last one, and that ends up with what we just talked about. Written, film, and people are all resources. So use your resources. Like if you want to use these guys in a school, bring them in and show the kids, like introduce them, say this is an absolute fake Indian. This is a guy playing Indian. This is not what you ever want to do. You never want to wear a costume like this at Halloween. And then go from there. Surprise the guy or gal, because there's many more out there, believe me. I just couldn't find enough pictures as quick as I needed to, and obviously couldn't spell a couple words correctly, but they're all over the place. So beware. Just evaluate resources. Understand there are good resources and bad resources that we put in front of our children and our learners, and even us as learners, as students. We see things that are good and bad, and we just need to learn how to judge them. We have to learn how to evaluate those resources. So that's today's lesson. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back next week. Just check for your assignments, and we'll go from there. Thank you.